The Castle Palace of Bolbaite. Bolbaite is a municipality in the region of La Canal de Navarrese, set in the very heart of the Macizo del Carrahuish. The old quarter is beautifully set on a rocky promontory, presided by the impressive Castle Palace of the Cabanyelles. The origin of the municipality dates back to Muslim times, 11th through 13th centuries, following the pattern of settlement of Al-Andalus for this region, with castle, farmstead, and orchards. Nevertheless, the first records of Bolbaite as castle and Islamic farmstead date back to documents from the 13th century. After the conquest of the city of Xàtiva by the King Jaime I of Aragon in the year 1244, the orchards, houses, and the castle in Bolbaite passed to the hands of several feudal lords between the 13th and 14th centuries. The first lord of Bolbaite, the knight from Xàtiva, Pere del Bosch, and afterwards the families of Macana, Marades, and Fabra. It was during the 15th century and up to the dissolution of the feudal lordships in 1837 under the lordship of the Cabanyelles family and the Pardo de la Casta Manfredi, where Bolbaite and its castle palace reached the maximum splendor and growth. The Castle Palace of Bolbaite, or the Cabanyelles, is a monument from the 13th through 19th century, declared as a good of cultural interest. It is a building that covers several building phases, since the Moorish phase, 13th century, where we can point out its solid tower with Muslim wall, then passing through its low medieval phase, 14th, 15th centuries, where everything is reinforced with new towers and walls made of ashlars, up to the splendor of the 15th and 16th centuries in its late Gothic and Renaissance phase, when the building becomes a comfortable lordly residence. The impressive tower that crowns the primitive Muslim castle can be considered as the origin of the Muslim farmstead in Bolbaite, a set formed by the main tower and an annexed area, around which about 30 houses were scattered in the plot of land of the current street of the Marquis de Gasta and the square. The solid mud wall, or the framed mortar in the castle of Bolbaite, was used in multiple fortresses in the last quarter of the 12th century and the first of the 13th century, to protect the Muslims of the region against the unstoppable moving of the troops of Castile and the Crown of Aragon. The higher area in the castle of Bolbaite and the lower are, or Albacar, devoted this last one to the protection of the population and the cattle in case of attack, was closed by a wall and a tower that watched the access to the fortress. There are kept, moreover, some remains of this defensive phase, which can still be noticeable in the remains of the battlements that crown the tower and the small blinded windows in its palace phase of the 15th century. The lower part of the castle hides inside it a water deposit, perhaps refurbished in Christian times with ashlars, which collected the water of the Morisco fountain, channeled by a conduct of baked mud tubes that is partially kept. Nevertheless, despite all the defensive deployment, the local Islamic society was not militarized nor prepared to face the troops of Jaime I the Conqueror, who conquered Xàtiva in 1244, and with it, all the depending fortresses, including perhaps Bolbaite. In the distribution that the monarch did between the years 1248 and 1249, the citizen Pere del Bosch was granted by chance the orchards, the houses, and the castle in Bolbaite. The garrison of Muslim soldiers was substituted by then-Governor Pere Guasc, who lived in the castle, in charge of speaking with both the lord of the land and the Moorish plowmen in Bolbaite. The enlargement of the western and eastern sides corresponds to that time and the following feudal lords from the late Middle Ages, corresponding to the 13th through 15th centuries. This last one shows its pointed arches of ashlars and Gothic design. These refurbishing will coincide with the so-called War of Castile, when the armies of El King Pedro el Cruel from Castile provoked the general alarm of the Kingdom of Valencia in 1363. The fortress in Bolbaite, like the rest of the castles in the Macizo del Carroix, which occupied an advanced position regarding the Castilian frontier, were reinforced. A good example of these defensive improvements are the loopholes from the wall in the higher part, enlarged with a solid building of ashlars, and the building of 2 defensive towers, one that protected the new access to the higher area from the western side, and from the Barbican Tower in the lower part, or Albacar. In the middle of the 15th century, the new political situation provoked that the castle would lose its strategic value for the defense of the kingdom. The new owners, especially the family of the Cabanyelles, important governors in Valencia, transformed the ancient castle into a stunning lordly palace of late Gothic style from the second half of the 15th century. The new use transformed the ancient rooms of Bolbaite into luxury saloons, imitating the urban residences in Valencia where Luis Cabanyelles ordered to build an splendid Gothic fortress, the castle of Benissanó. We can see in it ogee gates with gypsum moldings and spiral staircases, all of them from the final Gothic, very similar to the ones made by the gypsum master that worked in Bolbaite. In the pavement in Benissanó, there is also the typical rosette with blue and cobalt from Manises, which reappears in the noble room in the palace of Bolbaite. The Renaissance motifs that decorated the palace in Bolbaite are also very interesting. Gypsum decorations that reproduce medallions, furnishings, and vegetal acandeleri, which are repeated in the chambers in the castle in Benissanó. All this makes coincide chronologically the reform and decoration of these chambers and the ones in Bolbaite around the years 1496 to 1503, previous to the retirement and death of Luis I. Some years before the expulsion of the Moriscos from the peninsula, Catarina de Cabanyelles, the first del Media, gets married to Luis Pardo de la Casta Aguilar I Villanova, future Count of Alaquas and Marquis of the Casta, thus engaging 2 of the most important families in the Valencian nobility at that time, the Pardo and the Cabanyelles. Needless to say, it is the fact that the barons in Bolbaite from the 18th century never visited the barony. They simply, and as the absent nobility of the time did, ruled their heritage by means of heritage representatives who rented the lordly rights to local agents. Once the landlordships were broken up in the year 1837, both the pastures and the orchards, like the Castle Palace in Bolbaite, became private properties of the Marquis of Manfredi. The dictionary of Pascual Mados explains that around 1842, with beautiful proportions in other time, but nowadays it's a bit demolished. This is a situation that worsened in the hands of the following owners who plundered its valuable heritage and left it absolutely ruined. Fortunately, after some centuries of abandonment, the municipality has taken conscience of this local emblem and a jewel of Valencian heritage, starting a process of recovery and bringing value to it that is still in progress.